My name is Joel, and I've always been skeptical of the paranormal, but I've experienced something that I just can't explain. It was the summer of 1996 when my friend Derek suggested we go to St. John's Hospital, an abandoned building located on the outskirts of our small town. The hospital had been vacant since the 1980s after a fire led to its closure. Nobody ever bothered to rebuild it, and the decrepit structure was left to decay. The afternoon was hot, and the sun was unrelenting as we made our way towards the hospital. The old brick structure loomed in front of us, its faded paint and broken windows a stark contrast to the verdant foliage around it. The main entrance was boarded up, but Derek knew about a side entrance where the door had rotted off its hinges. We stepped into the stale, musty interior, our footsteps echoing through the silent, empty halls. The building had a layout typical of old hospitals: long, winding corridors, numerous rooms on either side, a reception area, and a few larger rooms which could have been operating theaters. Layers of dust covered everything, and decayed medical equipment lay strewn around. Old documents, yellowed with age, were scattered across the floor. There was an oppressive silence, broken only by our occasional whispers and the creaking of the old structure. We spent the first few hours exploring the ground floor. It was uneventful, albeit a bit eerie. We took a break in what appeared to be an old waiting room, the remnants of chairs still in place. As we were resting, I saw a door at the end of the hallway slowly creak open. I pointed it out to Derek, and we both stared at the door, holding our breath. It could have been the wind, but we had felt no breeze that day. We slowly approached the door and peeked inside. It was an ordinary room, much like the others we had seen. The eerie part was it wasn't as dust-covered or deteriorated as the other rooms. In the center was a single hospital bed with rusted bed rails and an old faded mattress. At the foot of the bed was a wooden chair, its paint peeling off, revealing the old wood underneath. We stood there for a moment, taking it in, when a sudden chill washed over us. I looked at Derek and could tell he felt it too. Then we heard it, a low, soft humming sound coming from the corner of the room. It was a lullaby, a soft, sweet melody that seemed to hang in the air. There was no source, no logical explanation, but it was there. Unnerved, we quickly left the room and shut the door behind us. We decided to explore the upper floors, hoping to shake off the strange experience. The upper floors were much the same, decaying with time and riddled with dust and debris. But the further up we went, the colder it got. By the time we reached the top floor, our breaths were visible in the air. It was on the top floor that we found the nursery. The room was full of old, rusted cribs and a few discarded toys. It was as if time had stopped in this room. We explored it silently, our flashlights revealing the abandoned remnants of a time long gone. Then we heard it. A soft, infantile giggle filled the air, echoing around the room. The temperature dropped, and I could see goosebumps appear on Derek's arms. We quickly scanned the room, our flashlights darting around, but there was nothing. The room was empty. Yet, the giggling continued, growing louder and more unsettling. Derek was the first to bolt, and I was right behind him. We raced down the stairs, taking them two at a time, the eerie sounds from the hospital chasing us. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of the outside world, our hearts pounding and our breaths heavy. We looked back at the old building, its silhouette stark against the setting sun. It was silent and still, the sounds of our experience trapped within its walls. I'm still skeptical about the paranormal, but that experience at St. John's Hospital, I can't explain it. It was as real as the dust on those old floors and as haunting as the broken windows. I've never been back there, and I don't think I ever will. You might say I'm scared, and maybe I am, but I'd prefer to call it respect. Respect for whatever it is that remains within the derelict walls of that old hospital. I received an unexpected letter in the mail, which turned out to be from the Department of Corrections. As I opened the letter, my heart lurched with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. It was an invitation to revisit Bleakbourne Penitentiary, the abandoned prison where I had once worked as a guard. The letter explained that the prison was being prepared for demolition, and as a former employee, I was being given the opportunity to take one last walk through its eerie halls before they vanished forever. I'd spent a significant part of my life there and wanted to take one last look at the place. As I arrived at the front gates, I was reminded of the sheer scale of the place. Time had definitely taken its toll. It looked really worn and decrepit. From the letter I received, I was under the impression I would be met at the entrance, but when I arrived, I couldn't see anyone around. I assumed everyone was already inside. The heavy iron gates groaned as I pushed them open and made my way inside. The familiar atmosphere that had always haunted the air engulfed me once again. It had been almost 2 decades since I last set foot here. The hallways were dimly lit, with flickering lights casting shadows along the cracked walls. I had no idea why the power was so flaky, but guessed it was to do with the place being so close to demolition. The air smelt dank, and I was worried it would trigger my asthma. They really let this place go downhill. Each step I took reminded me of all the nights I had patrolled these halls. I made my way towards the cell blocks, a place where the stories of the prison's past still lingered. I passed rows upon rows of empty cells, their doors hanging open. I couldn't help but recall the faces of the men I once guarded. As I went deeper into the prison, I could feel a growing sense of unease. I could almost taste the desperation that once clung to this place. A sudden noise jolted me from my thoughts. It was a distant scraping sound, like metal against stone. I figured that it had to be someone from the construction company, or maybe even one of my old work buddies. I followed the noise until I reached the solitary confinement section. The doors to these chambers were solid steel, designed to keep the most dangerous prisoners away from the general population. Yet here I was, facing the cold and imposing entrance to one of the cells. This one I could never forget. This was the cell in which we kept many of the death row inmates before their long walk to the end. I couldn't help myself. I pulled out the old set of keys I had kept as a memento from my time as a guard. My old skeleton key rattled in the lock, and as I turned it, the lock clunked open. I was surprised they hadn't changed them in all these years. Pushing through layers of rust, I heaved open the cell door. The room was shrouded in darkness, and my sense of unease definitely peaked. I stepped inside, the slotted window casting a weak beam of light into the room. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I fumbled for my lighter, managing to ignite it and illuminate the small space around me. Whilst the cell was empty, its walls were covered in cryptic symbols and crude drawings. The flickering light revealed paintings of faces on the walls. Their facial expressions were angry, and I couldn't stop staring at them. I have no idea what it all meant. Then I remembered the rumors and whispers among the guards about the existence of a secret society within the prison, one that delved into the occult and conducted forbidden rituals. The stories had always been dismissed as urban legends, but staring at the paintings before me, I couldn't help but wonder if there was more truth to them than anyone had realized. Then a distant voice echoed through the cell block, breaking the silence. Startled, I strained to listen, trying to make out the words. Surely that must be someone from the construction company. In trying to find the source, I quickly ran from the cell and followed the direction of the voice. As the night had drawn in, the darkness had filled the entire prison, making sprinting almost impossible. I remember being really angry and annoyed that the power didn't seem to be working. I could see less and less with each step, and just as I thought I was getting close, the voice grew quieter and less distinct. I stopped to catch my breath, and as I tried to get my bearings, I realized I was in near total darkness, my eyes struggling to adjust. Then from inside the darkness, something whispered in my ear. "It's your turn now." Terrified, I turned and ran. Almost colliding with a wall, I used it to guide me away from the voice. I turned a corner to see a dim light in the distance and went for it. I moved as fast as I could. Finally, I burst through the heavy iron gates of the entrance, the cold night air providing a much-needed relief from the prison. I collapsed onto the ground. I've still no idea if that was someone playing tricks on me or something else entirely I don't even want to think about. What I'm about to recount might seem like a story spun out of a novel, but every word, every detail is as true as the past that haunts us all. My story is about the now abandoned Miller's Amusement Park, a place that had seen better days in the 1980s. I was only 10 when I first heard the stories. The park was said to be haunted by the spirits of children who lost their lives due to a dangerous ride, the Twister, a roller coaster that had tragically gone off the rails. I remember their names clearly, Alice and Mark, a brother and sister aged 6 and 8 respectively. It was rumored that they still wandered the park, desperately looking for their parents. As an adult, with an interest in the paranormal and a knack for exploring abandoned places, I couldn't resist the lure of the park. So, one night in June 2002, I decided to pay a visit to the infamous Miller's Amusement Park. The park was situated on the outskirts of town, a place shrouded by neglect and a heavy blanket of memories. As I passed through the rusty gates, the moon cast an eerie glow over the deserted park. The outlines of forgotten rides, concession stands, and games booths appeared like ghostly apparitions in the dim light. I navigated my way through the paths, once bustling with excited children and tired parents, now enveloped in silence. My flashlight danced over the remains of the Twister, the ride that had claimed the lives of Alice and Mark. The sight of the skeletal roller coaster stopped me in my tracks. I could almost hear the joyful screams of kids, the whooshing sound of the coaster cars, and the catastrophic crash that had silenced it all. Moving on, I found the old ticket booth, a small wooden structure that had now succumbed to rot and decay. I could picture Alice and Mark's parents buying tickets for their children, their faces beaming with innocent excitement, oblivious of the fate that awaited them. Inside the ticket booth, I found the remnants of an old tattered newspaper. The accident was headline news. It read, "Tragedy struck Miller's Amusement Park yesterday as the Twister roller coaster, usually a source of joy and excitement for countless visitors, suffered a catastrophic malfunction, careening off its tracks with devastating consequences. 2 innocent young lives were tragically lost in the aftermath, leaving an entire community in mourning and raising questions about safety measures. As investigations into the incident unfold, the heart-wrenching guilt of the operator remains an undeniable aspect of this devastating event." I left the booth, and moving onward, I couldn't shake the unnerving feeling that I wasn't alone. I sensed movement in the darkness. I called out, "Hello? Is there someone there?" No answer. As I ventured deeper into the park, I came across a rusted merry-go-round, and it was at that point I felt an odd change in the atmosphere. Out of the corner of my eye, I could just make out 2 small figures standing behind the merry-go-round, staring directly at me, their bodies only just visible in my periphery. I froze in fear, unable to turn my head towards them. Just at the very edge of my hearing, I swear I heard, "Mommy? Daddy?" My blood ran ice cold. As much as I tried to overcome it, I was consumed with fear. Eventually, I managed to engage my head and started to turn towards the figures. As soon as I turned towards them, their figures seemed to fade into the darkness. I stared intently, trying to refocus my eyes, but there was nothing there. I couldn't help but feel their presence was real, but in the desolate atmosphere, was I just imagining this? Had I just spooked myself, or was this actually the ghosts of Alice and Mark still looking for their parents? As the dawn approached, finger-like rays of sunlight stretched themselves across the theme park until the whole place was enveloped with warmth, its strangeness disappearing with the coming light. I left Miller's with a heavy heart, thinking about the final moments of Alice and Mark. Their memory, and the tragedy that befell them, is forever imprinted on the grounds of the park. This story serves as a reminder of their tragic past,